Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes for others who are still joining to join us. I'll give us about 2-3 minutes, and then we will start. I see people are still joining. I'll just wait a few more minutes. Okay, while people are still joining, perhaps we could just, oh, I see people are still coming in. Let's just wait for a few more minutes. I see we've got about 130 people still and counting. Well, hello, everyone. Sanibonani, Jambo, Makadi, Bunju, Ola, Ndeo. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for making the time with us this morning. My name is Chipo Chipidza. I'm the new Business and Strategic Partnership Manager for Africa at LexisNexis South Africa. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a happy Africa Day. 58 years ago, the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity, now known as African Union, signed an agreement to end two of the worst injustices to the African people. These were colonialism and apartheid. This monumental event really spearheaded a series of numerous significant events in the history of Africa. Events which have at times led to the unfortunate loss of lives brought about by the unrelenting pursuit of freedom. Globally, this year's Africa Day is aptly named. It's being celebrated quite aptly under the theme, Silencing the Guns, creating conducive conditions for Africa's development and intensifying the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. LexisNexis is delighted to once again use this opportunity to host another of its interactive Rule of Law cafes. We hold these in collaboration with our parent company, the Leach Group. And it's always a great honor to bring together industry advocates for business and equality to discuss and to deliberate on issues around the access to the rule of law. Now, one of the priority and goals of the African Union of Agenda 2063 is the achievement of an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect, and respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. At LexisNexis, we've recently had some very robust and informative Rule of Law Café sessions, which seek to promote the gradual realization of this noble goal. It's great to be hosting another in the commemoration of Africa Day today. For today's discussion, we have some really exciting speakers who will, in their personal areas of expertise, be unpacking the topic, bringing the law into the digital age. This is something that LexisNexis is very passionate about in its role as a champion of the rule of law and also as a legal technology company. LexisNexis has a proud legacy of supporting the rule of law globally as well as locally. In 2017, we are very proud to say that our global head office in New York received the prestigious Corporate Leadership Award from the Freedom House for activism in advancing the rule of law. Through the RELX Group and LexisNexis Legal and Professional, we have a global reach across more than 180 countries around the world. This enables us to drive conversations like this worldwide and to share important perspectives. In keeping with the group's global vision, it is noteworthy that LexisNexis South Africa's vision is enhancing the potential of the African continent by advancing the rule of law. We believe this is the very foundation for the development and peaceful, equitable, and prosperous societies in which the law can be accessible to all. LexisNexis in South Africa has embarked on a deliberate and focused strategy to accelerate growth and innovation in Africa. This resonates with the day's topic of bringing the law into the digital age. Our efforts to accelerate our growth in the African continent expose us to innovative methods of engaging with our markets, methods that compel us to place innovation at the forefront of our existence in order to bridge the digital divide that exists between Africa and the rest of the world. Indeed, a modernized and effective justice system is crucial in efforts to fight crime and corruption, which are rampant on the African continent, unfortunately, and bring the long arm of the law into the digital age. The link between today's events and Africa Day has digital transformation of the law at its very core. And so we are really looking forward to a dynamic conversation with our diverse and learned panel. At this point, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you a well-known son of Africa, one who has witnessed numerous events in the history of this continent and its people, and its people's quest for freedom and also their development. He is a seasoned journalist, a radio host, and television presenter. I'd like to invite our facilitator, the esteemed Jeremy Maggs, to take over and lead us into the panel discussion. Over to you, Jeremy.
Chairperson, thank you very much indeed. And as you were introducing me, I was looking over my shoulder to see who that person was. You flatter me, and thank you so much indeed. And may I take the opportunity of returning the compliment and wishing you, our participants, and our esteemed panel members a happy Africa Day as well. We're bringing the law into the digital age. That is our webinar today. And by hitting start video, I've also brought myself into the digital age as well. These are the rules, if I can point them out very quickly. I try to keep these things as informal as possible. I'm going to introduce all of our panel members to you. One by one. We will have a brief conversation, and then I'm going to open the discussion a little bit later on in the webinar for a broad round table, and obviously to take questions from our participants as well. Let me give you the context if I can. We know what the theme of this year's Africa Day is, but to that end, we also know that there have been many studies, have there not, that have mentioned how important the rule of law is as far as a basic condition goes to economic development and prosperity. I'm not going to quote all the studies, suffice it to say that they are substantive and that they are very, very important. Let me bring it home. For its part, the South African government, we are well aware, through its Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, is on a mission, and I use that word carefully, guardedly, but with a great deal of confidence. It's on a mission to push, to promote, to drive legal processes, support law enforcement agencies, bring the law into the digital age through its justice modernization program. It is all hinged. It's fulcrumatic when it comes to technology. There's very necessary digital transformation and modernization of the law is at the heart of today's discussion. That's the preamble, that's the context, and I want to bring our first guest into the conversation. Videsha Proothveerajh, you are the chairperson of the board of LexisNexis South Africa, and a very, very warm welcome to you. I'm going to flatter you just as Chippo flattered me. Who are you? Well, I can tell our participants today, you are a well-known and well-accomplished businesswoman. There have been numerous accolades that I'm aware of, and that you were also named the most influential woman in business and government for ICT in Africa. You're a Forbes changemaker on the continent, and also one of the 50 most inspiring women in South Africa. I'm also going to let our participants into a little secret, which might embarrass you, Videsha. When we had our preamble to this conversation, I did ask you what medication you were taking, and if you could share it, because you are so optimistic, you're so upbeat, you're so chipper. Whatever you've got, I want some of it. Your inspiration and your energy is an inspiration to all of us. But enough of that. Let's get to the first question, if I can. You've been quoted oft as saying that LexisNexis in South Africa's core purpose is to advance the rule of law in order to, and I quote, create meaningful impact right across the African continent. Those are broad and noble sentiments, Videsha. Why do you say that, and why is all of this an important aspiration when it comes to South African business generally?
Well, I think first, let me take the opportunity to make it a little bit more personal, my own personal why. I am a daughter of Africa, and I am the product of an African village. And Mother Africa has shown me abundance in ways that is really undescribable. And so, you know, from my perspective, I do believe that whenever we are given a platform that allows you a level of leadership, it is important to give back, especially when you have received as much. So, you know, for me, from a personal why perspective, I've always been a fan of Africa. I mean, as you know, I've had many opportunities to leave this country and, you know, go seat myself elsewhere in the world. And I honestly believe that this is the final frontier. Africa is where it's at. And so I wouldn't be anywhere else. And at LexisNexis, you know, as you grow older, you find that it is important to have a legacy. And part of the legacy for myself and for LexisNexis is really following our true North Star, which is all about advancing the rule of law and making sure that we support the equality of all citizens before the law. And so it's very important for us to ensure that we are always advocating for the rule of law. And then enhancing the potential of the African continent it's a joy to do, because there is so much of potential on this continent. We have seen that as Africans, we come together in a way that is just outstanding. Whether you think about the World Cup, M-Pesa, the first drone village in Africa, whenever there is a necessity, Africans come together, and we do so in a very unique way because we have a cultural heritage that is very unique to us. And so for me, you know, just playing a role in helping this amazing continent take its rightful place on the stage, on this global stage, become globally competitive is something we have to do. Because if you think of Africa's population, I mean, our youth population has doubled in the last 20 to 30 years. We have to create an environment on this continent that is conducive for the growth of the millennials that are coming, so that, you know, they have a support system, a structure, a rule of law that really helps them grow in a way that is healthy and is not really, you know, plagued by the malices of the past, you know, be it corruption, be it poverty, be it disease, all the things that we've had to endure as a continent. So I think we owe it to the next generation to leave a land where they can really take this continent to where it needs to be. And lastly, I mean, I'm a techie at heart. I've always lived and worked in the tech world. And so I have seen firsthand how technology is an enabler. And, you know, if we're able to marry technology and the rule of law, it is a marriage made in heaven, because it will help us leapfrog many of the obstacles that we have, but it will also help us position Africa as the disruptor. We are not going to be disrupted by the rest of the world. We will not be the continent that is taken advantage of, where our resources are used in other places in the world. We will own what we have. We will take our resources, people, natural resources, the amazing spirit of this continent, and we will make Africa great.
Videsha, thank you very much indeed for a very strong opening statement, and also for setting the scene as far as this is concerned. I'm going to get back to you a little bit later, but at this point, Bernard Oundo, good morning to you, current president of the East Africa Law Society. I can also tell our participants that you're a senior partner with Citadel Advocates in Uganda, a specialist at project finance and public-private partnership. Now, you represent, Bernard, and a very good morning to you, a regional bar association, if I'm not mistaken, something in the region of 19 or 20,000 lawyers from several national bar associations across a number of countries. Interesting to note that 70% of those are young lawyers, so that connection with technology is immediately there. But here's my question to you, Bernard. The adoption of legal technology, what's it like, particularly in your region across East Africa? And perhaps more importantly, maybe speak to us about the pace that it's happening at, and also how the pace needs to increase in order to achieve better or truer development.
Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to LexisNexis also for hosting this great panel on this great day, the Africa Day. And I am honored to be on this panel. And first, before I even answer your question, the East Africa Law Society has about 19,000 members. We exist, among many other things, to advance the cause of rule of law. And therefore, this topic is very pertinent to what our mission is as a law society. So Jeremy, I think across the East African landscape, what we are increasingly seeing since COVID-19 is the adoption of technology. And we've seen the courts in the East African region, and speak about the courts in Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and South Sudan, develop some sort of electronic case management system, largely to deal with the impact and the effects of COVID-19, to sort of provide a framework and assist the litigants and lawyers like us to be able to file cases electronically, to be able to serve court documents, to be able to pay and even receive rulings. Interestingly, one of the things we realized during COVID was some of the rulings actually were just being shared on WhatsApp. And a very exciting development, considering that prior to COVID, there was always a lot of resistance when you spoke about technology and the courts. Now what we are seeing is an adoption, and we're also seeing legislation being made to actually support the process. So these are good initiatives. This is arising out of the pandemic, and this is certainly worthwhile. But of course, we can't speak about what is happening without just mentioning the challenges that we are also seeing. Of course, one of the things that we see is because of the unstable electric supply, you'll always have a few issues here and there, unstable internet connection. Interestingly, we have a joke that because of the unstable internet connection, you could keep telling the judge, "My Lord, can you hear me?" And he's always be saying, "I can hear you," but you keep also saying, "My Lord, can you hear me?" So you have those sort of challenges. Increasingly also, because of technology, you may have some sort of costs rising, especially to the young lawyers. And therefore, this is something that we feel that we need to be able to address. And I'm happy that having strategic partners like LexisNexis, we're trying to see ways in which we can support our young lawyers in terms of adopting technology so that they can be able to efficiently provide legal services. So briefly, that is where we are, Jeremy, and I look forward to further questions. Thank you.
Bernard, thank you very much indeed. I will get back to you a little later as well. And at this point, and I'm glad to see that we are right on time, because being a broadcaster and having been in broadcasting for almost 40 years, I am always a slave to the clock. Brendan Hughes, a very good morning to you. If you'll bring yourself up onto the screen. You're an attorney, the chairperson of the Law Society of South Africa's Electronic Law Committee, also director of a legal technology group developing solutions for the legal services industry. Brendan, I always get a little bit nervous when I've got to wade into a conversation about artificial intelligence. But let's start there if we can. It plays, you contend, a big role, or can play a big role in promoting access to justice. Break that down for me, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jeremy, and happy Africa Day to you as well. I think that it would be a generally held opinion that the legal system is one which most people feel is inaccessible or unaffordable. It doesn't necessarily serve them particularly well. And that's fundamentally a question of economics. It's very expensive to access legal services. It's very expensive to take good legal advice. Most people, most small businesses can't afford to get their contracts professionally drawn up. Most people find it very difficult to enforce their rights through the courts. And it's in this area where I think the role of technology and innovation can play a very fundamental role in reducing the cost of legal services, and certainly huge components of legal practice, which consist of very time-consuming and intensive tasks of processing information, digesting information. The latest sort of trends in information technology are showing us that a lot of the work that professionals such as lawyers have been doing for hundreds of years can be done sort of much faster and much more affordably by technology. And this isn't just a sort of short-term trend. This is an evolution in the way professional services are going to be delivered. And certainly as we look over sort of the next 20, 30 years, I think we're going to see major developments in this area. And hopefully, if those are well-directed developments, it could be something that really does promote and advance the rule of law. When we speak of the rule of law, we're talking about a society where people feel that they have access to the protection of a legal system, where they can enforce their legal rights, and where if we ourselves owe other people legal obligations, responsibilities, we should know that we will need to meet those responsibilities. Unfortunately, I think the general perception in the population at the moment is that the legal system is there for people who can afford lawyers. It's something that protects the economically advantaged, and that's not really a society that we can say is based on the rule of law. So it's in these areas that we're seeing a lot of developments around artificial intelligence. It's still very much at its infancy, the development of AI in legal services, and most of the tasks that we're seeing being handled by AI systems now are things such as document assembly, automation, due diligence processes, which is, where a business is potentially needing to do a review of a large quantity of information, such as contracts, picking up issues in contracts by processing them through information engines that can extract key issues from those contracts very quickly, rather than take hundreds or thousands of hours of lawyer time on that. But the types of things that legal AI systems are going to do are going to become increasingly complex. And certainly over a 20 to 30 year period, we're going to see things that today we don't really yet imagine that AI systems will be able to do will become a lot more commonplace. The delivery of legal opinions, as well as sort of assessing merits of cases. All of these things, once we've trained the legal AI systems to do them, will be something that we'll see change. And I think as long as these changes are sort of well directed, this is going to be something that hopefully can really change the economics of law, and in that way promote the rule of law in society.
Okay, Brendan, thank you very much indeed. I'll get back to you in just a moment. I want to introduce now Nozipho Mvulane. You're an admitted attorney and a partner at Rajaram Mvulane Attorneys. It's based, if I'm not mistaken, Nozipho, in Durban. And I'm glad to see that you pride yourself on being a professional, confident and strong women-empowered firm. And those are important sentiments, particularly on a day like this. So a small to medium-sized firm, I get that, I understand it. I would imagine it's probably more incumbent upon an organization like yours to harness the power of technology and innovation. And maybe during the past 12, 18 months of the pandemic. Break it down for me, Nozipho. How have you done that?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jeremy, on this beautiful Africa Day. We are a law firm based in Durban. And as you've said, Jeremy, technology has been very important during this time. As you're well aware, with COVID and the very necessary lockdowns that we've had, a lot of firms have been struggling, especially on the small to medium size. So a lot of firms have had to downgrade their staff, and that's also impacted our reliance on technology. We require a lot more technological assistance than we have before. We've had to adjust in terms of holding consultations by Zoom, by Skype, by Microsoft Teams. It's also actually increased our reliance on companies like LexisNexis to provide assistance. So whereas before we would have had to go to law libraries, now our reliance is on technology, going online to LexisNexis, accessing case law, accessing legislation at our fingertips. So small law and also medium-sized law are really reliant and have become reliant on technology in the past 12 to 18 months, as you've stated. Our working hours have been impacted. So going to the office is not something that, we've have to do in the past 12 months. So now we're reliant on, opening a computer, what systems are available to you, how can we help our clients? Because at the end of the day, what we do is to assist our clients in all that we do. And, enforcing the rule of law, as we've spoken about previously, access to justice. A lot of small and medium-sized law firms are the ones that are providing to justice for people on, on the ground who might not necessarily have the fees to go to larger law firms. So we're actually very instrumental in things like that and those sorts of issues where someone comes to us with a problem and we need to be able to resolve it quickly and efficiently, as well as in a cost-efficient manner. And that's why technology has really stepped up and has been assisting us, with those issues, just to say, how can we assist our clients? And also, how can we file things more efficiently at court? How are we running our business to adapt to allowing technology to assist us? And as Brendan had previously said earlier, AI and the rule of law was moving a little bit slowly, but now with COVID and the impact that it's had on a lot of firms, we're realizing that the law and technology cannot be separated. The technology is here to assist us, to assist the way we practice, the way we manage our firms, and the way that we progress is to follow technology and then to let technology assist us in all that we do.
Right. Nozipho, thank you very much indeed. And James Leach, a very good morning to you, Chief Learning Officer at Africa Legal. And I think it's important at this point to focus on the educative aspect of all of this. You're focused on creating what you term Afro-specific learning solutions for the legal community across the continent. How are you doing that? And perhaps talk to us a little bit about the level and deficiency possibly when it comes to accessibility.
Thanks, Jeremy, and happy Africa Day to you and to all those that have logged in. I think it's important to take a step back and to recognize that the rule of law is a constantly developing, a living construct. It is dependent upon you and I just as much as it is upon, judges, lawmakers, and so forth. So, the rule of law isn't static. I think that's critical. Now, as a learning designer, keeping that in mind, there are two primary considerations that I think when designing learning and when considering the importance of accessibility in learning, there are two considerations or two target markets, I suppose you would call it, that we need to be mindful of. And those are practicing lawyers who, of course, need to be as up to date with developments in law and policy as possible, to be knowledgeable in emerging trends in their areas of practice, whether that be criminal justice, corporate and commercial law, fintech, digital disruption, whatever the case might be. And the second market is those organizations and individuals in society who need to have access to law, need to have access to legal knowledge. They need to know what their rights and also their obligations are. So ultimately, I think from an educative perspective, we fit in with, or education aligns with, almost what every other speaker has already mentioned. You know, Bernard mentioned how the East Africa Law Society is made up of 70% of it is 70% of its membership is young lawyers. I think it's incumbent upon us as learning providers to ensure that we are designing learning that meets the needs of those emerging lawyers, effectively to ensure that they are future fit. AI solutions, you know, something that Brendan has mentioned. When considering AI solutions and potentially implementing a new product within a firm or implementing a new solution within the criminal justice system, there is going to need to be training on that, because ultimately, I think it's important to keep in mind that you can never remove the people from the problem. And education is certainly one aspect, one piece of the puzzle that is critical for ensuring a robust rule of law. You know, all of us have seen the impact that technology and that platforms like social media can have on society in recent years. And I think it's incumbent upon us, you know, and learning providers like Africa Legal to ensure that we are designing learning that not only meets the needs of, you know, of the Afro-specific context, and is generating Afro-specific solutions, but does so responsibly as well.
James, thank you very much indeed. A little earlier this morning, I mentioned to Mrs. Maggs that I was going to be cross-examining at some point a group of lawyers, and she said to me, "Good luck, my darling, you're on your own." I have taken copious notes through all of your opening statements, and I want to come back now to a broader panel discussion if we can. And Videsha, I want to start with you, if I may, and maybe at this point you can all bring your video up so that I can see you. You talk about technology, Videsha, and this is a question to all of you, creating meaningful impact. I'm not entirely sure whether we have evaluated and interrogated what exactly meaningful impact is. What's your view, Videsha? What would you like to see meaningful impact within the space actually be?
Well, I think meaningful impact is really advancing the rule of law and taking steps forward. And you know, impact is about something that is measurable at the end of the day. It's not something that we talk about. It's not warm and fuzzy, you know, all the time. It's about how are we actually changing the face of law on this continent? How are we making the environment more amiable for us to be able to create societies where equality is inherent, where we are able to give opportunities to every single citizen on this continent, where we ensure that everybody is protected under the umbrella of the law and nobody is left marginalized. So it's a big ask. And I think what's important are partnerships like this, because nobody can do it by themselves. You know, we have to have joint visions where we come together and we work together to ensure that we are able to measure the progress of the continent. And, you know, we say things like, if the rule of law becomes effective, and it has to, it's not an if, when the rule of law becomes pervasive and effective on our continent, things like corruption will shrink, because, you know, as the rule of law improves, corruption automatically shrinks in any continent for that matter. So there are many ways we can measure it. If we can see a decrease in corruption on our continent, if we can see an increase in access to resources on our continent, if we're able to, you know, we measure a lot of rule of law stats, whether it's, you know, civil justice, fundamental rights, open government, constraints on governmental powers. And currently, unfortunately, South Africa and the African continent doesn't rank very high in terms of global competitiveness. So we have to be able to see those indicators going up. And of course, I mean, the biggest impact you will see is that as a continent, we will prosper. Our people will become more prosperous. We will have access to more opportunities. We'll be able to take that place that we rightfully have on a global competitive stage as well.
Videsha, thank you. Bernard Oundo, many, many years ago when I was falling asleep during a business school class, I do remember one statement which said, you can't manage it unless you can measure it. It's an old cliche, isn't it? But I'm going to keep turning the screw on this one. How do you measure, in your opinion, meaningful impact? Videsha, for instance, uses the word making technology more amenable. It's difficult to measure amenable. What thoughts do you have on measurement? If I can ask you just to unmute yourself, which I think will be the phrase of 2020 and 2021. There you go. Over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's an excellent question. Now, I mean, you have, number one, you have a global justice report, which is the World Justice Report, that actually measures rule of law index. And so you have certain indicators that they look at to look at your ranking in terms of rule of law. And unfortunately, in East Africa, for instance, the World Justice Report for 2020 has ranked Uganda, I think, 117, Kenya 102, Tanzania 93rd, Rwanda is 37th. So you have actually a couple of indicators that you can look at: corruption, and Videsha mentioned them, constraint to government power, and all these things that you can actually look at. Now, from my perspective, if I put the World Justice Report aside, I want to look at how many lawyers are actually using technology to drive their business. You know, how many people are actually being able to access the courts using, for instance, suppose we developed a mobile app. Do you know how many times people touch their phones? And you developed a mobile app just to enable people to access the court and access justice. Can we be able to use those sort of indicators? But also, more importantly, are we being inclusive even in terms of the strategies that we are taking? And if we are being inclusive, how much are we doing about inclusivity? Those are, for me, the key things that will make an impact. The last and final one is that, you know, in Africa, and the reason we're advancing rule of law is because we've had pushbacks from government. Now, as a society, as East African Law Society, for instance, we have taken the government of Uganda to the East African Court of Justice for internet shutdowns. We saw a trend which started with Tanzania, Burundi, Uganda, and then we realized quickly that Kenya, which is going to have its elections in next year, will also have internet shutdown. Now, if we're talking about technology advancing our businesses, how are we going to do it if we have internet shutdown? So our strategy was, you know, as a society, we need to push back on some of these issues. We believe that pushing back on internet shutdowns will help in progressing technology. That is very critical for us. So you can measure impact in a number of ways, and that is helpful, but also initiatives like the strategic partnerships. And here I think we need to upload LexisNexis for being a champion. Most times, most people think that once you're elected president, then that becomes your sole mandate to fight for the rule of law. And so you leave it to the president of the East African Law Society. And we forget that all of us can actually be a meaningful force for change. And therefore, companies like LexisNexis who advance the cause of rule of law should be uploaded. And we should encourage more companies to do organize such events. That way, we shall advance the cause of rule of law, we shall be more stable as Africa, we shall attract foreign direct investment, our doing business rankings will go higher, and we'll, at the end of the day, all prosper when we do that. Thank you, Gary.
Bernard, thank you very much indeed. You've raised two big macro issues. You've talked about measurement indices. You've also spoken about the specter of internet shutdown. But Brendan Hughes, I want to reduce this, if I can, very quickly, that advancing the rule of law on a practical day-to-day basis is going to be measured, I imagine, on penetration and uptake within law firms themselves. Let's talk about it at a micro level. How do you advance the rule of law by getting more and more people to take up technology? And we can also then work our way into where the current deficiencies are right now. But right now, it's just a question of promotion of penetration. How do you do that?
Well, the first thing, Jeremy, would be to bring down the cost of penetration. You know, when you're asking for what are the key areas that we can measure to see improvements in the rule of law, we have to talk frankly about the costs of accessing law. And, you know, we can see an example like an event like today, a number of speakers gathered together, talking to a number of people in an audience. If we weren't doing this by video conferencing, we're doing it the old way, it would probably have cost, you know, quite a lot of money to put an event like this together. So we can see immediately how technology enables us to reach a greater audience. I would say the key area to look at is the amount of time that lawyers need to spend working on matters should reduce significantly. I think there's a lot of concern in the profession that means that there'll be less work for lawyers to do. I don't think that's the case at all. Law is in 2021 predicted for the first time to surpass a $1 trillion global legal services industry mark this year. I don't think that number is going to go down through the use of technology. I think that $1 trillion industry is just simply going to be able to serve more people. In South Africa, we have, I think it's approximately one lawyer for every 2,000 people in the population. In countries like Canada and the United States, it's more like one lawyer for every 200 people. So we simply need to find a way to enable law to be practiced more efficiently using technology. That will bring down the cost of an average representation of a person in a particular type of matter. The cost of creating a contract, for example, should reduce. The cost of representing somebody in litigation should reduce. And that's really where I think on the topic that I'm interested in artificial intelligence, that's the key metric, is to see, is technology and artificial intelligence bringing down the average cost of receiving legal representation in particular types of matters. And if we bring down the cost, we'll increase the penetration.
Nozipho Mvulane in Durban, is it simply a matter of cost, or is it also a mindset change, as Brendan points out, learning to practice law more efficiently?
Absolutely, Jeremy. I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's more of a mindset change. I think traditionally, you know, we're taught a certain way as students, and then we become attorneys. Especially as a young attorney, I think we're more agile and we're more willing to adapt to technology assisting us in our practice, as Brendan was saying, with document generation, how we assist our clients more efficiently. But I think perhaps with the older attorneys, I think there is that fear that, you know, with this technology available to people on the street and, you know, clients, they might not necessarily need attorneys. And I don't think that's necessarily correct. And I think that's why it's more of a mindset shift for them as well, to accept technology into our practices to assist us. You know, what technology also does, it makes it available for us to be abreast of a variety of different practice areas that we might not have historically been accustomed to. So I know a lot of perhaps of the small to medium size of the older firms, you know, they have a niche practice area that they, you know, they're more comfortable with. But with the advance of technology, you have a lot more law at your fingertips. You're actually able to keep yourself abreast of a lot of happenings in the legal profession. You're able to teach yourself as well in terms of, you know, to widen the scope of how you offer your services to your clients, as well as the type of services that you are offering to your clients. So I think with, you know, us as lawyers, we do need to accept technology is here to stay, and it's actually here to assist us more than anything. You know, it will assist us become more efficient. And, you know, at the end of the day, we are a results-driven practice. So if our clients are saying, that we are cost efficient and we're cost effective, and we produce work efficiently and work of a good quality standard, then that's how we retain clients and that's how we gain more clients as well. So I think it's a little bit of both, but mainly it does require a larger mindset shift for attorneys to accept and be willing to use technology in order to assist their practices.
James, there's one interesting point that Nozipho brought up, and maybe you'd like to reflect on that. So there's concordance here that a mindset change needs to occur. Patently, that is happening to a greater or lesser extent within the legal profession. But where do clients fit into this, James? How do you bring them onto the caravan?
Well, I think that just to take a step back to both what Brendan mentioned as well as what Nozipho mentioned, I think that the disruption in our space is very, very real. There are, if you use the example of a young startup entrepreneur who is seeking to protect their interests and facilitate their business growth, whatever that may mean, whether that be simply setting up a company, protecting their IP, enhancing their brand and reputation, facilitating negotiations with foreign investors, whatever the case might be, those individuals, those entrepreneurs need to have access to legal services. That for me is the key. Part of that picture is knowing what their options are. It is one thing to say, well, go and speak to a law firm. But for so many young entrepreneurs and for so many kind of people starting out in business, the law and legal practitioners oftentimes sit in the so-called ivory tower. So there's that issue of accessibility. There may be problems, simple, real life problems of transport, that you actually can't get to a city, you can't get to legal offices to have a face-to-face consultation. And I think, disruptors like Law for All, like My Legal Basket, there are a range of other service providers and app developers which are addressing this problem. So part of it is creating an awareness, educating society as to what their options are when it comes to finding those accessible solutions. It's been a major issue in South Africa, and it's been referenced a number of times by people in government, by people in parliament, saying that there is too much red tape in the process. Well, AI solutions and technological solutions and digital disruption is part of the solution to that problem. But linked with that is, sure, you can develop the perfect solution, but you still have to create awareness of how to do so,
Right. Okay, James, so I see Videsha nodding her head. I'll come back to you, Videsha. Very simply, in terms of that awareness quotient, how do you spread the gospel then? What's the strategy?
Was that me or James?
It was to you, Videsha.
I think it's sessions like this, but it's also wider sessions. I mean, I agree totally with what James and Brendan were saying around, technology is an enabler, absolutely. And we can develop the most amazing world-class solutions. But unless we are helping people understand how they use it for meaningful impact, you can keep creating away in your dark room for all you want. So, having the responsibility to give people choice and educating them and making them aware of what's out there is very important in the adoption of technology in the legal space. I could not agree more. And I think it is what we do. I mean, forums like this, the work that James and their team does, the work that Brendan does around making sure, firstly, we are making those efforts to take technology to the next level in enabling a digitization of the justice system. But then secondly, it's about holding hands and, taking somebody by the hand and helping them through the process almost one by one until we get to a mainstream, critical mass where it will continue and have momentum on its own. But initially, we've got to hold people by the hand and take them through the process as well.
Brendan Hughes, within a law firm itself or any law department, whether it be in the public or private sector, who does the hand-holding, as Videsha refers to it at? Do you need, for instance, a chief legal technology officer?
Certainly think it's a job description that we're starting to see more of. I think the primary drivers for change in the sector need to come from the client side. There are progressive law firms who will always be looking to do things more affordably, more efficiently, and will recognize the competitive advantage of doing that. But I don't think that there's a general willingness amongst the profession itself to find ways to do things better and faster. It needs to really come from the client side. Fortunately, we do see the in-house legal advisors that you're referring to there begin to put a bit more pressure, particularly in the large multinationals where there's an awareness of opportunity to use technology a bit more efficiently, putting some pressure on their outsourced legal service providers. Here I'm speaking about the law firms, to come up with better and faster ways of doing things. So that's really what I think where the change is being driven from, in the company and law firm environment, very much the client side, very much the insurance industry, who are probably the most frequent litigators around the world, who are always looking to bring down their litigation expenses, which in turn can result in more effective and cost-effective and competitive premiums being passed into the market. But in the citizen justice side, it does need to be driven largely by the state in making its courts and its infrastructure more accessible, and then working through the organizations such as the law societies, bar councils, to spread awareness of that into the general citizenry, legal aid clinics, for example. So there's really a number of actors in this drama of making law more accessible, and everybody's got to collaborate. And fortunately, there is a reasonable degree of collaboration. The committee that I chair, the Technology Law Committee of the Law Society of South Africa, does have interactions with the Department of Justice. There is a two-way communication when the Department of Justice is suggesting new rules for court to digitize processes. They do engage with the profession to get input and feedback. So more of those types of engagements are obviously going to be beneficial, but everybody's got a role to play in promoting the rule of law.
I do want to come back in a moment to the gap that exists, and the best way I can phrase it is between the external stakeholders and the system, and how to bridge that gap. We'll get to that in a moment, but Nozipho, if I can come back to you. You're a medium-sized law firm. How have you managed, embraced, and sustained technology? And perhaps more importantly, where have you found the deficiencies and how have you plugged those gaps?
Thank you, Jeremy. We're actually a small law firm, so we're on the smaller side. But
I've just promoted you to a medium-sized law firm. Take the accolade. Take the accolade.
Take it. Thank you, Jeremy. I'll take it. But we've had to embrace technology, especially during COVID. Our practice wouldn't have been able to survive otherwise. And that's why we've been so grateful to the products that LexisNexis offers and provides. But the deficiencies that we've experienced when it comes to technology is that, unfortunately, our court system is not quite up to date in terms of, having a fully functioning case management system. I know the courts are trying in that aspect. So we, on our side where, we are ready with documents that need to be sent to court or need to be filed at court. Unfortunately, especially here in Durban, some of our courts are not able to, effectively implement technological services, that would require faster, more efficient case management systems that would allow us to provide justice to our clients and just to have our clients' matters be heard. Something that Bernard had also mentioned earlier is, with us, it's load shedding. So, when we don't have electricity or we don't have power, a lot of our technological services just don't work. So, we're reliant on it for fiber and for data and for Wi-Fi, because we are on the smaller side. So we rely on a lot of, so without electricity, we actually encounter a lot of problems with that. So in as much as we can work remotely, but when we have those sort of issues, it's almost we're stuck as a smaller firm, and we've tried to find ways to adapt around it. But, you know, I think, Jeremy, all you can do is adapt to the situation. You know, at the end of the day, we need to assist our clients the best way we can, and we just have to manage and push through. We can't really go to our clients and say, oh, we've encountered this problem or that problem. So, you know, we just have to try.
Yeah, it's a pity that the technology is there to help us, but the reality is, in many respects, it still remains a battle. Bernard, Oundo, I want to come back to you. I want you to address two issues for me, please. One is the gap in implementation, in other words, where those deficiencies exist between stakeholders and the system. But there's also a question that's popped up on the screen, and deal with this one first, because I did gloss over it, and it is absolutely critical. It's the specter of censorship in many ways. How can the government internet shutdowns within your region be overcome by pushback? That's a question from one of our attendees. Let's deal with that first, and then let's talk about the deficiency gap.
Thank you, Jeremy. I think that question is a good question. And I think one of the things we've done is to litigate on the powers of government. When can the government actually order a shutdown of internet? Our belief is that by litigating on these issues, we create precedents that make it difficult for governments to shut down. And once you have a court decision out there that says you can only shut down the internet, maybe for purposes of defense and national security, that becomes the precedent for internet shutdowns. So our belief is that by going to the East African Court of Justice, what we have done is we are going to create a precedent that will be able to guide all governments within the region, and also create a global precedent on internet shutdowns. We hope that that will help in dealing with some of these issues. In terms of the second question, I think we need to look at it from a perspective of it's a whole ecosystem. I mean, you have government, you have the private sector, you have the lawyers, you have the judiciary. We've been debating on who should take the lead. Should it be the judiciary? Should it be the law associations, which facilitate the change of mindset? And so in terms of addressing the gap, we need to look at that whole sort of ecosystem. How do we push government to ensure that the cost of internet is low, meaning that you need to bring in more private sector participation? And for instance, I'll give a very simple example. If we can have our ISPs share infrastructure, in some countries you have every ISP having the same infrastructure for providing internet, but if they can share some of the assets that can be shared, that can help in reducing the internet cost. Number two, the budgets for the judiciary. Now, if you look at the budgets for the judiciary, most of them have been looking at accommodation, physical places, okay? Can we be able to shift some of that money to advancing the role of technology, so that even when governments are passing budgets, we are urging them and advocating that, can you ensure that there's a higher budget now for technology? So that can help us to be able to facilitate. Of course, the other issue that Nozipho raised is the issue of unstable electricity supply, which we also meet and is a challenge. Of course, that has to also be dealt with, bringing down the cost of the tariff. And again, like I said, it's a whole ecosystem. It requires us to collaborate. It requires us to advocate jointly. That way, we'll be able to address the issues that face the technology.
Yeah, Bernard, thank you very much indeed. I'm beginning to think that maybe we should have asked a representative from ESCOM to join this panel as well. James Leach, I want to come back to you. In my preamble, I said this, that for its part, the South African government, through the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, is on a mission, I said, to improve legal processes, support law enforcement agencies, and bring the law into the digital age through the Justice Modernization Program. Allied to that, one of our participants, Francesca, writes, our courts will have to be updated to more sufficient online services. Do you and the other panelists, I wonder, have a view on the pace and the efficiency of the Justice Modernization Program in mid-2021? Where do we stand right now? Are we moving apace?
I think, Jeremy, I'm gonna kind of deflect your question a little bit and say I will leave that particular question to the other panelists to answer, because I think they've got a better insight than I do. But what I will say about it is that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has, much like any other area, laid bare where there are deficiencies, and it has accelerated in huge part the need for change and the need for disruption. Nozipho has mentioned the challenges around engaging with the court process, logging claims and files and evidence and so forth electronically has been a challenge for a number of practitioners. Simply put, I think that we're behind the times, that we are behind where we should be. It's not that long ago where we saw court papers filling the streets of Pretoria outside the North Gauteng High Court. Those are scenes that we just shouldn't be seeing. So I think that we are behind the times. I think it's a safe statement to say that we are behind where we should be and that we do need to be accelerating the change. But going back to Bernard's point, I think that change should not be solely placed, or the responsibility for that change should not be solely placed upon the judiciary or upon the Ministry of Justice. It needs to come from the community as well. It needs to come from practitioners as well. And it needs to come from people providing the solutions and developing the solutions. This is part of a much bigger dialogue. But in short, to answer your question, from my side, I would think that we are hugely behind where we should be and that we do need to accelerate change in that space.
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable and safe assumption to make. Videsha, let me rephrase the question slightly to you then. Are you sensing within the judicial system in South Africa that there is there's a more amenable approach, that there is an understanding that technology needs to move quicker, the adoption thereof, and that the benefits are there for all to see?
I mean, we definitely get the sense that our partners in the Ministry of Justice understand the need. I think it's the impetus that's missing right now. So it's they understand the why. We need to help work on the how. It's the how do we get there? And like James said, how do we partner so that all the stakeholders get together when we all have this shared vision, right, of what it should look like and what the impact can be if we get it right. So we have to start working better together to educate. Even government needs help in terms of understanding, as LexisNexis, for example, we have entities across the world. And so we work quite aggressively to bring what we call the best known methods to bear, to say to government, this is what we're seeing in other parts of the world, and this is the impact that it's having in other parts of the world. So we really need to follow suit. So I agree that there is a understanding of what we need to do. It's the how. That we all need to still agree on and figure out. But, time is running out as well. We don't want to be left behind, and we don't also want to be, the continent that's always needs to be saved by the rest of the world. And I really believe that as Africans, we're great at developing African solutions for Africa. So, when we band together, government, corporate, NGOs, the likes of, what Bernard and his team does, and technology companies, very important. If we all get together and figure out that why, then it's, there'd be no stopping us, really. And I just wanted to say, we work with a lot of small and medium law firms. And I think the hardest thing, there is no industry where the adage rings true, time is money, like the legal industry, right? Every minute is billable. And so it's that opportunity cost of stopping and taking the time to learn about technology and how it can actually help you leapfrog. So sometimes it's hard to have that little bit of a medium term to longer term focus to say, I need to get this right so that in the longer term, I'm making more money, I'm more productive, I'm billing more hours. But it's just helping these small to medium law firms understand that opportunity cost and what they need to do to fill the gap, which is, it's a practical issue that we have. I mean, if you're not billing for every hour, then how do you pay your rent at the end of the day? So how do we help people better understand the success stories that something like AI, I mean, Brendan, I'm sure the minute you say AI and machine learning, people are like, oh God, that's jargon and it's just too alien for me to understand. So how do you break it down and make it more digestible and more understandable and let them see what it brings to them if they're able to embrace it?
Brendan, I feel that the next question is going to be picked up by you, and I'll strand it for you if I can. You might have a view on the pace of the justice modernization program. I'm happy for you to address that. But here is an interesting question from one of our participants, and I think it sums it up very well. And I want to read it to you. As a young entrepreneur that does not know about the law and not knowing what to do as far as the law is concerned, and I'm paraphrasing here slightly, when I come to starting up a business, are there available technology platforms that young entrepreneurs can easily access and get information from? It goes on a bit, but Nkosinati, thank you for that question, because we've spoken a lot about the law firms, but the reality is that the success of this country's economy, the continent's economy on this Africa Day, hinges on people like Nkosinati. It's the small entrepreneur, the business person that will eventually grow into the medium-sized law firm that Nozipho runs. How do ordinary entrepreneurs, Brendan, access this information, and how should their thinking be calibrated?
Yes, Jeremy, it's a very real question, and one I see a lot of practical examples of where small business entrepreneurs, they face a problem that they can't afford legal services, so they look online for resources. Fortunately, there are a number of resources online that you can find. The danger, however, is knowing whether you're looking at something that's particularly well suited for your situation or just looks to be well suited, and you actually end up implementing something that's completely inappropriate. And I've seen so many examples of that where small business owners have come to me at a point and said, well, this is the contract I signed. I found it on the internet. It looked like it was the right sort of thing, but there's so many subtleties in these areas of law that it really does help to actually have somebody with experience still helping you through that. It's not yet a field where I think you can do too much self-help without running into trouble. If I can give a sort of a colloquial or a personal example, many years ago, my wife and I rented a particular property, and the landlord of our property didn't actually have a lease, and we said, don't worry, we're lawyers, we'll draw up a lease. My wife's also a lawyer. We drew up a lease. It was particularly favorable to the tenant if we ever needed to cancel the lease. And the landlord accepted the lease. We were good tenants, we had a good relationship. Years later, I got a call from that same landlord who said, Brendan, remember you used to rent this property from me all these years ago? Well, I've been using the same lease you gave me all of these years for all of the tenants who've subsequently rented the property for me. And now I realize I've got a problem with this tenant, right? And the lease doesn't give me the protection I was hoping for. And it's because the person thought, well, I had a lease and all leases are created equal. They're not. Law does tend to need a little bit of bespoke advice. But I think, the basics of understanding how law works is something that should be accessible to entrepreneurs. There are a lot of short courses these days that can be taken to help skill up on the fundamentals. I think certainly, business law 101, those types of principles are things that can be accessed. There's no one-stop shop that I would recommend for that. There's a lot of overlap as well between legal systems, especially Commonwealth sort of historical legal systems where principles of our commercial law are fairly similar to other Commonwealth jurisdictions, but not identical. So it's definitely true that there are a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of templates that people can access, but I would definitely say with caution, because you can get yourself into sort of more trouble than you appreciate by using some of that. It's the same as self-medicating. You know, there's a lot of health advice that you can self-diagnose your symptoms online, and you know, you think that you've got a good understanding of, but actually, you know, there is a reason why the legal profession exists. There's a reason why people study it for a number of years to become skilled in the practice of it, and that element should never be overlooked. What I do say to entrepreneurs is that when they're doing sort of resource allocation, when they're planning how to spend the budgets that they do have, they typically spend all of their money on developing their product or their service or their marketing. And I do encourage them, and I know I'm coming from sort of a biased perspective, to begin to appreciate that successful businesses do spend a bit of money on law. It is an area of business which really does deliver value in the long term. So I just try to encourage the mindset to be prepared to engage with the legal system as early as possible to make sure that your business is sort of getting grounded on the right footing, and you don't start off at a pace and then realize, you know, you've made a bunch of mistakes. I do give talks to entrepreneurs. They're generally, you know, free talks, and there's a number of people who give these talks, and you can give so many practical examples. And when I think you tell the stories of entrepreneurs who've sort of made the right and the wrong decisions at different points in the evolution of their business, it really comes home. What does it mean to take some good legal advice early on in a business journey?
So, Nkosinati Madalani, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for it. Mishak Molodzi, I'm going to get to your question in just a moment, but Brendan, back to you very quickly. I speak on behalf of all the panelists when I ask you this question. Did you go back to your landlord and charge him for drawing up a new lease template? We all need to know this immediately.
You know, Jeremy, in that case, I fessed up to him. I said, you know, have you still been using that same lease all of these years? And he said, yes. I said, we definitely, you know, you should think about changing that. And it's something to be aware of as well, that when you take legal representation, you know, you are ethically instructed to represent the interests of your client. So, you know, a lot of small business owners sort of feel that the other side's lawyer is looking out for them. And they think, well, we did get a lawyer to draw up the contract. The other side brought a lawyer. And you must always be aware that that lawyer is acting under an ethical duty to protect and promote that lawyer's client's interests. So be very careful about assuming that because there's one lawyer engaged in a project that everybody's getting equally looked after. Yeah.
Okay. This is how I'm going to navigate our remaining moments. I am going to raise one more big topic that Mishak Molodzi has raised, and I think it's a critical one, and we haven't looked at it yet. Then I'm going to come to the entire panel, and I'm going to ask you for the call to action. It's all very worthy of us to raise this issue about bringing the law into the digital age, but what's the call to action? I want you to start thinking about that as we wrap it up. But Mishak, you raise a critical point, and I'm going to put it to all of our panelists. Videsha, starting with you, if I can. Very simply, Mishak asks this question: is it possible to have privacy in the digital age? How do we minimize cyber risk? That, I think, is a critical question. Videsha, let's start with you.
Yeah, there's so many angles to this. I think from a technology perspective, we're finding that as we call it, the surface area increases as we become, you know, much more open to these cyber attacks. And, you know, I talk about crime as a service because it's a very lucrative business as well. You know, there's a whole world going on there. You get these millennials that are entering the workplace, they're digital natives. You can't tell them that, you know, you can't access something on your phone, whether it's you know, litigation papers, etc. So you have to start focusing on what can be done, whether it's, you know, at a corporate level, your policies that are in place, making sure your security and your encryption, etc. is ready. And then you have to also educate your employees in terms of what are the risks in terms of not being compliant. And, you know, especially in a legal space where you are representing the rights of a client, he has the rights of, you know, his information staying confidential and private. And what happens if you're not able to do that? So yeah, I think privacy in this digital age is open to interpretation, but, you know, there is a risk of doing nothing, which nobody can afford as a corporate. So take the right actions, make sure your policies are in place, make sure you have the right technology to really protect your company, because, you know, we all know it, you know, brand equity is earned very slowly, day by day by day, and then you lose it just in one go because you've had a breach. So, you know, that's really important. So yeah, I think, and I'm sure the other panelists can talk about, you know, all over the world, we've seen these breaches when it comes to confidentiality and privacy and the rights of human beings, etc. And so it's an interesting age. I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there is a formulated, this is the answer to privacy and this massive new surface area that we see from a technology perspective. But understanding, firstly, arm yourself with knowing what you have to get right. There are things that you cannot get wrong. So understand that even as an entrepreneur, what are the things, the basic minimums that you have to have in place to protect client data and privacy and yourself from an, you know, intellectual property perspective as well.
I take 3 words from that: knowledge, policy, and action, and all of that needs to happen immediately. Bernard Oundo, president of the East Africa Law Society, give us a quick view, if you would, on the whole notion of privacy and risk.
I think Videsha has said it all. And Jeremy, because you're not a lawyer, when we used to read judgments and the judge agreed with the opinion of the judge who had made the leading judgment, he would say, I have nothing useful to add. I concur. So I concur with all that Videsha has said. I think it's knowledge, it's being aware, and then getting the experts on board. You can't be the solution to all your problems. I think the critical issue is getting the right people to help you deal with some of these issues. Thank you, Jeremy.
I will extend the metaphor then, and Brendan Hughes, I will come back to you and ask you very briefly, do you have anything useful to add?
In South Africa, we're certainly reaching a watershed moment in the protection of privacy. We've had legislation that's been on the table for a number of years, the Protection of Personal Information Act, that's only really kicking into full effect in the next couple of months, because it's been an area that hasn't done particularly well in terms of self-regulating between contracts concluded between people using digital technologies, don't tend to read the terms and conditions about the data they're sharing. So it's something that's become increasingly regulated. It's sort of the European Union led the way in this area many years ago, and we're sort of trying to bring South Africa into the same sort of standards. So I think we are going to see changes locally in that area in the second half of this year. It'll become a topic that awareness will certainly increase. And for the legal profession, it's sort of a fundamental part of ethics these days. You know, it's always been an ethical requirement to uphold and protect confidentiality and legal privilege in your communications with your clients. And that's traditionally been done by being careful about how you sort of delivered files and letters, etc. Now with communications taking place electronically, the legal profession itself, its ethical duty has evolved to actually be aware of the basic principles of information security. And if you don't have that awareness yourself, to make sure that you're sort of engaging with people who can assist you in that area, because it's always been a core part of the confidence that people can have in the legal industries that their communications are safe and secure and private.
Brendan, thank you very much indeed. Nozipho, is this an issue that consumes you?
Absolutely, Jeremy, it does, especially with data protection and data security and breaches that we see all over. As Brendan has said, you know, with PUPI, we've had an extended, what I would call implementation, but now it's time for us, especially as firms and law firms, where we keep such confidential information, like confidential proprietary information of not only ourselves, but our clients. So it's very important for us to, at least when it comes to digital security, to have policies and protocols in place to ensure that, you know what, when we say our clients' information is confidential, it's actually kept confidential. And if I can just briefly go back to the question, I think, you can't really have privacy in a digital era. You know, I think what we always advise our clients, especially when it comes to their employees, is that, you know, once something is published, it's online. So whether it's published in a private group, because people will say, oh no, but it was a private WhatsApp group or a private Facebook group. You know, once it's published somewhere, it's very hard to limit that. Because it's digital, it's very hard to limit the impact of those statements that you published or something that you shared online. So it's very important that, you know, when you use internet and internet resources and just technology in general, is to be very mindful of the potential impact that it can have for you as a person, but also, as Videsha had said, the company that you work for, your family, and so on and so forth. So digital privacy is something that's huge. It's huge in terms of cybersecurity for us as businesses, but also just as day-to-day interactions as human beings. It's something that's very important.
James Leach, at the beginning of this webinar, this is what you said. The rule of law is a constantly developing living construct. The rule of law is not static. Risk, privacy feeds directly into those sentiments.
It does indeed. You know, I think that it's critical for individuals to know what their rights and obligations are, and what the inherent risks in adopting technological solutions are. You know, for those in law firms, I think what we see is that there is a massive risk when it comes to data protection and cybersecurity. And it's in all likelihood a risk that many within smaller firms in particular are not taking seriously enough. It's the perception that this will always happen to somebody else. You know, I won't be a target. But the reality is that law firms hold such sensitive information that will be valuable to, you know, to anybody who wants it. So I think it's critical that individuals take the lead, that they know what their rights are, that they know what the inherent risks are, as well as how to protect themselves. You know, for the rule of law to flourish, as I said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, individuals in society need to take ownership of protecting their rights. We are very fortunate to have influential and impactful regulators. You know, the information regulator in South Africa is particularly on the front line on this one, taking the lead, you know, which is great to see. And we're very lucky to have a regulator in that position. But at the end of the day, still requires the individuals to take ownership of what their rights are and to protect themselves. And in order for that to happen, going back to my ballpark, in order for that to happen, you know, education and learning is fundamental.
James, thank you very much indeed. As we approach the half hour and the end of this webinar, I need to say that as a journalist, we like to find a solution and we'd like to put a punctuation point on any discussion. So I did ask all of you for some closing remarks, but essentially, what is the call to action here? Bearing in mind that we want to bring the law into the digital age. Videsha, let me start with you. What's the takeout here? What's our broad call to action today?
Wow, yeah, so many things that I can think of, but really for me, it's about figure out the partnerships where you share a vision and act together, do something. Don't, you know, let it be, you know, LexisNexis is going to sort it out, or James or Brendan or Bernard is going to sort it out. It takes all of us to do one thing at least, so that we can move one step forward at a time. And just one other thing is, you know, I think it's time we all embrace the promise of technology instead of being scared of it. And that talks to being educated and understanding what the promise of technology is. And if you can't do that by yourself, then partner with a trusted advisor to help you do so.
Videsha Proothveerajh is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairperson of the board, LexisNexis South Africa. Thank you very much indeed. Bernard Oundo, President of the East Africa Law Society. What is your call to action?
We have two options: conform or adapt. We have no choice. We have to adapt as quick as possible. That's number one. The second one, I'm reminded by the words of Justice David Maraga. He is the former Chief Justice of Kenya who was in that petition that nullified the elections in Kenya. And he said something very fundamental that is important. He said the greatness of any nation lies in its fidelity to the Constitution and adherence to the rule of law. And above everything else, respect to God. So I remember those two things as I go on my duties. Rule of law, very important. Technology, please adapt. You have no choice. Thank you.
You have no choice. Bernard Oundo, thank you very much indeed. Brendan Hughes, Chairperson of the Law Society of South Africa's Electronic Law Committee, your closing remarks.
I think that COVID has definitely accelerated people's use of technology, in both business, law, education. So we probably stand at a point where we've got an advantage to make meaningful change now in the way law is practiced, to bring technology into the profession in a way that can reduce costs, promote sort of access to justice, and taking advantage of this moment, I think, to concur with what the other panelists have said, does require an extra effort to be made to educate and make people aware both of the opportunities that technology presents as well as the risks. And that awareness is going to promote responsible and effective adoption, and in the long term, hopefully really promote the rule of law. So education awareness seems to be a key area of activity at this point.
There certainly is a common theme among three of you in that respect. Nozipho Mvulane from Rajaram Mvulane Attorneys, what would your call to action be?
My call to action, Jeremy, would absolutely embrace technology in the manner that you run your practices or your business as well. Technology is here to stay, and it's also here to assist us in all that we do. And whilst having said that, again, cybersecurity is important. So have policies and protocols in place just to ensure that, the way that you're running and the way that you're using technology as well is in the correct manner. My call to action would just definitely be embrace technology, learn constantly, teach yourselves, and also have policies and protocols in place just for breaches and so on.
James Leach, Chief Learning Officer, Africa Legal. I'll give the final word to you.
Well, without kind of rehashing what everyone else has said.
Try and do it without using the word education.
My one big takeaway would be to never forget about the individual involved.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Chipo, I think that I have completely overrun my time, but from my perspective, I want to thank all of our panel members. Thank you very much indeed. And Chipo Chipidza, Manager, New Business and Strategic Partnerships, LexisNexis Africa. I'm going to hand it back to you for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It has been quite an insightful session, and I certainly learned a lot from this. In particular, what really stood out for me is Videsha's comment on the fact that Africa is where it's at, and that technology is not only an enabler, but it's the future. And also talks around the meaningful impact and the measurability of the deliberate efforts that have to be made in order for the rule of law to become a reality. What also stood out for me was the adoption of technology being non-negotiable, which Bernard so passionately put forward. I think that is something that we've all come to realize as we have been charting this course in the African region. And I also think that you rightfully pointed out, stakeholders such as ESCOM should be brought to such panels to try and understand the kind of challenges that we face as business people in just trying to make a mark on this continent. What also stood out for me was Bernard's issue about how budgets should be prioritized for technology. And I think that is quite a huge thing that needs to be thought about going forward. The cost of business was also quite a huge thing. I also was very interested to note that the fact that AI is an integral part of our legal system, it needs to also be educated to all the people that have to be using it. And that they are quite, to use Brendan's word, a number of actors in this drama to access the law. A kind of a public-private partnership that needs to actually happen so that this can be a reality. Nozipho, your points of small, medium-sized law firms and them being time and cost conscious was really quite an interesting point for us, in that we actually often forget that when people actually take on this work, they're doing it for survival. And for both the practitioner as well as the client, these things need to actually be looked at quite closely. James, thank you very much for your input. The rule of law, again, I will rehash what Jeremy mentioned, and I think that's quite a huge takeaway. Rule of law is not static, and it is imperative to design learning programs that are responsive and responsible. Those were two keywords that really stood out for me. And you talked about disruption being the key, and you also talked about creating awareness so that people can find accessible solutions to making all of this a reality. I would like to end this on this whole summary on something that quite stood out for me that Nozipho mentioned, which is that technology is here to stay, and we should actually embrace it. Now, folks, on that note, I'd really like to thank you all and thank our esteemed panelists for making the time to share their valuable insights today. To the audience, I would really like your questions. You really made this a truly interactive session, and please feel free to continue with the conversation on social media using the hashtag LNSAROL and hashtag rule of law. Please also note that we've captured all the questions, and if they were not answered, they will be responded to via email, copying all who have attended here today. The recording of this session also is going to be available, as well as all post-event communication via our social media. And these channels will be on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, the usual suspects. Also, please look out for our other webinars that will be coming in the future. You can go to lexisnexis.co.za/webinars. And we do look forward to meeting you in our future webinars. Thank you all again for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of the Africa Day, and please keep safe out there. And I'd like to end this on an African goodbye. Kwaheri, au revoir, and tada. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.